Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day. Today is a wonderful day to celebrate the great achievements of the Irish in America and the great achievements of the Irish throughout history. Having been brought up in a Catholic school with nuns that were at least half Irish Catholic, I feel like I know the tradition and value it, at least on a very personal level. But today is a podcast I've been waiting for a long time. And today's podcast is about the Hunter Biden computer and hard drive that I disclosed back in 2020, before the election. I believe it was October. Gave it to the New York Post. The New York Post published much of the contents of it. Very incriminating information. And they were banned from Twitter. And largely the story was censored. And I was accused, along with others, of being a Russian agent by people like Brennan and some of the other co-conspirators in the whole Russian collusion situation. Well, the New York Times today, March 17th, 2022, much too little, much too late to save the American people from maybe the most disastrous president we've ever had. I don't know of one that has cost us more lives in such a short period of time than President Biden, whether you're talking about Afghanistan or the whole way he's handled the situation in Ukraine. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, this is much worse than it has to be because of his indecision, his apparent cowardice, his unwillingness to decide in any kind of timely way. He didn't do the sanctions, it was too late. If he ever gives them the MiGs, it'll be too late. The man's a complete disaster. You would have known that had the New York Times, the Washington Post, what we call the mainstream media, hadn't censored most of it from you, engaged in the fiction that it was Russian disinformation. Well, now the New York Times, again, much too little, much too late, on St. Patrick's Day 2022. People familiar with the investigation said prosecutors had examined emails between Mr. Biden, Mr. Archer, and others about Burisma and other foreign business activity. Those emails were obtained by the New York Times from a cache of files that appears to have come from a laptop abandoned by Mr. Biden in a Delaware repair shop. The email and others in the cache were authenticated by people familiar with them and with the investigation. Were authenticated. They were authenticated in October of 2020. They were published in October of 2020. They were available online in October of 2020. I put them in my rudyscommonsense.com podcast in October of 2020, before the election. They obtained it now. And now they say they're authenticated when they published the stories about Russian disinformation debunked. How often was it referred to as debunked? The way they claim the issues of fraud in the election were debunked. No one's debunked anything. In fact, now, let's be clear. The New York Times admits in their circuitous, dishonest kind of way that entire group of emails were authenticated. Well, how about this one? How about this email? Why doesn't the Times print this one? It'll explain what happened to the money that Hunter was getting. You want to know? I mean, people want to know, how did Hunter get all this money? You want to know how Hunter got all the money? It's in the hard drive. It was there since before the election. It's about as clear as a bell. I held this up many, many times. I'd like to see this published in the New York Times. This is the same set of emails that they're relying on for that story. This is the same authenticated set of emails. Let me read to you what it says. This goes back to, it looks like Christmas Day 2018, 12/25/18, 1:41 p.m. You want to be exact here. We've got a message number. This is Hunter Biden to his daughter, and it describes extraordinarily clearly for a conspiracy the exact agreement, the conspiracy that you have to prove that Joe Biden for 30 years was receiving bribes. I mean, there's 50 more pieces of evidence to prove it on the hard drive. But I don't know, you need much more than this? And why wouldn't this be published before an election if you have this about any candidate? This is Hunter Biden to his daughter. Not me, Hunter Biden. Hidden, covered up, which makes it even more evidence of guilt. I love all of you, but I don't receive any respect, and that's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. Obviously quite bitter, huh? I don't know. Maybe it's the many years of being used as a bagman when he was suffering from an addiction that his father, his narcissistic father, imposed on him because he couldn't find somebody else to do his dirty work. Could be. I love all of you, but I don't receive any respect, and that's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. I hope you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family. For 30 years. That's about when Joe first started taking bribes. Maybe a little earlier with his brothers. I don't remember which of the brothers was the first one, so I don't want to say the name until I go back and check. But one of the two brothers was the early lobbyist who was getting payments of money, and big articles were written about why is Joe so favorable here? Why is Joe so favorable there? Why was he Mr. What was it, MBNA Bank? All those stories. You can go back and look. It was, cheap little amounts of money. I don't know. I bet a lot of them do that. A lot of them are crooks. Well, for 30 years, Hunter has been paying the expenses of the family. Why would that be? Because Hunter was making money, not for Hunter, for Joe, to influence Joe. And Joe was acting accordingly. He was doing exactly what the money would seem to be directed for. You got to be stupid not to figure that out. They're not stupid. The people who cover this up, they're corrupt. Let's go on and read the rest. That's really good. It's really hard. I don't know what's really hard, but it's really hard. But don't worry, unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. That's the cut for the boss. This is, as I said, a crime family. I told you that well before the hard drive came out. I began alerting the New York Times and the American people to this starting, I first began to learn about it in November of 2018 when it was put in my lap as evidence that what was being claimed to be done in Russia was false, that the Russian hoax was a hoax, and that really it happened in Ukraine, and that people participated in it, including Joe Biden, and including making up false stories, getting false information, using the George Soros charity to help, using the American embassy as the conduit for it. And then they gave me the evidence of the bribe that I knew nothing about. I wanted to tell you, this is long before he ran for president. This had nothing to do with his running for president, as the liars said. It had to do with my defending my client aggressively and promptly. I should be vindicated there also. Everything I did is backed up by the same kind of information. And everything I did was as a lawyer for my client, for which I'm now being penalized because, I don't know, they have some kind of irrational pathological hatred for him. But in any event, they talk in this article circumlocutously about money laundering and about FARA, and they say they're not, FARA is the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and they're not sure that he'd be prosecuted for violating it. I mean, like, nobody's ever been prosecuted for violating it except Trump people, by and large. I mean, in its history, it's had, like, you could count them on your fingers, prosecutions. But then they started it up against Manafort and Trump people. They did one Democrat to even the score, but it was kind of a cheap little case. So I don't know if they're going to prosecute him under Foreign Agents Registration Act. He certainly violated it. He did take steps not to, but he did it anyway. But the main thing is, you got a money laundering case. Oh my goodness, this is probably the smallest one. But you got one that is so obvious because I don't even think you need witnesses for this. It's one piece of paper. Now, they have had this piece of paper for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. This doesn't even come from the hard drive. I put this out for the first time in February of 2019. And John Solomon put it in his column around that time. And they had it. Well, it was offered to them in October or November of 2018. They turned it down. The Southern District of New York did that. But then they had this around that time. And then it was available. It was available in the Hill, was published in the Hill newspaper. It was featured on Fox News. And some of the others, of course, it was censored by many. And it's a straight out and out money laundering involving Hunter and Joe Biden. And I'll show you the pages. And I don't know if you can see this easily, but we'll put it up on the screen for you. This is a notice, an official notice that comes, by the way, in I think it's November. I'm sorry, in February of 2016. Now, why is that significant? Because this is around the time the prosecutor was fired and Joe Biden bribed and extorted the president to do it. About the same time. This is the time that the lying Democrats and Biden say there was no investigation. There was no investigation. On February 1st of 2016, Mr. Shokin, who was the prosecutor, issued an arrest warrant for Hunter Biden and Mykola Zlochevsky's company. That's all a matter of record. The idea that there was no investigation is a total lie. The idea that it was debunked is a total lie. I asked immediately, show me the report. They never have. And just to be clear, they received this about that time, that same time, in February of 2016. And it says, according to publicly available information, Burisma Holding Limited, that was Mykola Zlochevsky's crooked company, one of the most crooked in Ukraine, and its director, Hunter Biden, are involved in corruption affair. The following transactions made to Burisma Holding account in AS Private Bank are known to the Latvian FIU, Financial Investigation Unit, I would think, right? And it goes on to show all the money that went through Wire Logic Technology AS, a Belize company, as payment for a loan, to Digitech Organization LLP, and then finally transferred to the account of Devin Archer, Hunter Biden, Alan Apter, and Alexander Kwasniewski. It's about $14 million. And we know from records in the Devin Archer prosecution for fraud, but he's going to jail for fraud. That's Hunter Biden's partner for many years. That $3.1 million went to the Biden crime family, went to the Biden Corporation. And then there's a note that says $900,000 for Joe Biden, who at the time was still the vice president. So in addition to the 30 years, 50%, et cetera, you've got that. And they've had that before the hard drive. This all could have been investigated before he even announced for president. But it was covered up. It was covered up by the Justice Department. It was covered up by all of the major news organizations. So I accept this statement that the emails have been authenticated for what it's worth, which is an admission of what I knew back then, that we were telling the truth and they were lying. I accept it as authentication of the fact that the hard drive, which reveals numerous crimes is accurately and absolutely Hunter Biden's hard drive. I accept it as authentication of this message here, that 50% for 30 years was going to Joe Biden, senator and vice president, which would mean bribery. I mean, this is money for, working for the most crooked oligarch in Ukraine, who, by the way, I should point out, the Bidens don't just take money, they take money from our enemies. The book by Peter Schweitzer that is out now, being banned as much as it can be, documents in great detail $31 million from the Chinese communists. There's $3.5 million from Moscow, a friend of Putin's. There's anywhere from 7 to 14 million from Ukraine. Now, remember who the man is he's getting the money from. This guy was a Ukrainian, but close to Russia. This was one of the Ukrainians that favored Russia, who was thrown out for that reason. In other words, he's on the side of the people who are now killing the Ukrainians. That's the one who was paying off Hunter Biden for nothing, except to influence Joe Biden. And the reason for the payoff is simple. It's right there. You got to be a fool to avoid it, or a crook. It was to buy Joe Biden's office and his influence, because he was the point man for Ukraine. And then he stepped in, and he got the case against Mykola Zlochevsky quashed. And Mykola Zlochevsky walked off with a $20 billion company and $5 billion in cash. That's what it's all about. And that's the tip of the iceberg. So maybe now that it's been authenticated, you'll get to see this one about 50% for Joe for 30 years. Maybe you'll get to see the document that, you have seen it, but not in the Times. Maybe you'll get to see the document from the Office for Prevention of Laundering of Proceeds derived from criminal activity that names Hunter Biden as being involved in or being investigated for involvement in this criminal activity, which is money laundering. And then with a separate notation that $900,000 went to Joe Biden. Maybe you'll get to see that too. And then maybe you'll start to get to see the real crimes, the sellout to China. This is a disgrace, what happened in America. The censorship of this information might be as serious as the fixing of an election, the vote itself. Could that ever happen? It's a fraud. This is information that under any other circumstances, at any other time in our history, I think, we were an honest enough country that you would learn it beforehand, before you had to make a very, very difficult choice like selecting a president. Now, you should have known about the existence of these things. You should have known that Hunter Biden asserted that he gave 50% of the money he earned for 30 years to his father while his father was in public office. You should have known that there was a money laundering transaction of $14 million, which went in part to Hunter Biden, with a notation that an additional $900,000 went to Joe Biden while he was vice president. You should have known about all the transactions. I'm not going to go through them now. I mean, they're all on my podcast. With the Chinese, particularly now, might explain why he seems to not be able to do anything in the best interest of the United States. He seems to be acting in the best interest of other countries. You would learn that he's got conflicted loyalties in Ukraine. I mean, the man paying his son was a Russian. He was Ukrainian, but he was Russian. He's thrown out of office because he was working with Putin. Think your homeowner's insurance covers home title fraud? Think again. And neither does your common identity theft program. The FBI calls home title fraud one of the fastest growing crimes, which is why you need to go to HomeTitleLock.com, America's leader in home title protection. Here's the problem. The deed to your home is the only document that proves you own it. And the deeds to all of our homes now are online. In minutes, a criminal can find and forge your name off the deed to your home and refile as the new owner, like Jeff, who spent a fortune in legal fees after a thief forged himself onto the deed to Jeff's home and took out loans. Jeff didn't have home title lock then. He does now. Or Deborah, who thought our common identity theft service would protect her. Then a criminal got onto the deed to a home and had her evicted. Deborah has home title lock now. HomeTitleLock.com is your peace of mind, and the deed to your home is protected. Visit HomeTitleLock.com. HomeTitleLock.com. Welcome back. So, just to show you how serious this is and how deliberate the covering up of this information by the Times and others was deliberate. I'd like to remind you that I first alerted the American people to this in February of 2019. He didn't announce for president until March, April. At the time that I disclosed it in order to show that what was going on in Ukraine was what they were falsely claiming was going on in Russia. And that's what was presented to me, of which the Biden bribe to the president of Ukraine to get rid of the case against the crooked oligarch Zlochevsky. Also got rid of the case against Antac, one of Soros's companies, that was said to possess a great deal of information, false information that had been obtained, some of it paid for, with regard to President Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Paul Manafort. And that there was a specific false piece of evidence that had been produced by that group in order to restart the Manafort investigation. That's the way it came to me. It wasn't to hurt his chances of being president. If you had asked me in November of 2018, when I first got it, or January, February of 2019, when I first disclosed it all, and I disclosed it to John Solomon, who wrote it, and he had his own information to corroborate it, and I disclosed it on Fox with the document, putting out the documents. So when they say that I put it out to affect the election, that's complete garbage. I put it out to vindicate my client. And then, when I started my podcast, if you go back, and people say, well, why didn't you put this out? My goodness. I gave it to John Solomon. I gave it to Fox, and whoever wanted to print it, printed it. And then, that was a year earlier. A year later, I went and I put my witnesses on screen. If you go back, you go to rudyscommonsense.com, you'll see that episode 3 was the trial witness number 1. That was Mr. Shokin, Victor Shokin, who describes how he was thrown out of office and how afterwards they concocted this story that he was corrupt. And he goes into detail about President Poroshenko explaining to him how he was forced by Biden to get rid of him so they could kill the case. Not just the case against Biden, but the case against the multi-billionaire who was paying them, who also ultimately paid President Poroshenko in Ukraine. This was a joint, very serious bribe at the highest levels of our two governments. The Vice President of the United States and the I guess he's the Prime Minister of Ukraine, or the President of Ukraine. So when they impeached President Trump and held this back, had the hard drive been used and this information been used, it was perfectly appropriate for President of the United States to ask the Chief of State of Ukraine to investigate a crime at the highest levels of both governments. In fact, failure to do it would be a violation of your oath of office. Had they not concealed this, that would never have taken place. We've never had that impeachment nonsense of any kind. But they were so determined to destroy Donald Trump that they destroyed many of the most fundamental values of America, didn't they? When President Trump spoke to President Zelenko and said it had to be investigated, he was just carrying out his sworn duty as President of the United States. You can't, I don't care if it's the day before an election. And it wasn't. It was well before that. You can't allow this to go uninvestigated when it happens between a president and a vice president of two countries, a bribe. I mean, we lecture Ukraine on corruption. Can you imagine every time Biden went there and lectured about corruption, what a hypocrite he was? Everybody in Ukraine knows about the bribe. Because of the New York Times and their confederates, not everybody in America knows about it. A lot of people didn't know about it when they voted for Biden and gave us this disaster of a president. Then if you can go to number four goes into more detail. The Biden family crimes conclusively proved, sworn affidavit. I want to emphasize that these podcasts contain something Democrats never have. Evidence, sworn affidavits, videotapes, testimony. Here's number 5, and here's a witness right there. There he is. The complete witness. Proof of bribery and collusion. That's Mr. Teleshenko. American people should have all been aware of this testimony. They can evaluate whether he's telling the truth or not. I mean, if I were the Biden people say, well, he's lying, and Shokin's lying. But what about all the documents to corroborate them? At least the American people should get a chance to evaluate that. I mean, this man basically tells the whole story of how they tried to fix the 2016 election. American people were deprived of that. This is before we get to the hard drive. Then you can go to number 6, proving extensive corruption and criminal conduct by the Biden family enterprise. This goes back into the earlier dealings, including getting his brother into a $1.5 billion housing contract in Iraq. A brother who didn't know anything about building houses. Or you can go to episode 8, where I reveal the prosecutor's file from Ukraine. We can see some of them right on the front page there with a picture of Biden and some of the documents explaining the investigations that were going on that the Democrats and Biden said were debunked, and the reports of the investigation and the criminal activity they had discovered. Or you could go to number 9, which shows how our money that was going to help Ukraine didn't really get to the Ukrainian people. That's number 9. Oh, it's only about 3.5 billion of the 6 billion that they can't account for. And then there's an interview with the Ukrainian whistleblower over exclusive new documents. These are other investigative documents obtained from the Ukraine. This was all available a year and a half to 4 or 5 months before the election, 6 months, 8 months before the election. Covered up. And then when the hard drive came out, it was completely covered up. And the hard drive, of course, then revealed a lot more evidence. I'd say the most serious of which, because I think right now you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg with this money laundering and Foreign Agents Registration Act and income tax. The real serious crimes that fills in what he means when he says he's been giving him money for 30 years are the sellouts that Biden does when he becomes a point man appointed by Obama. One of these podcasts has a chart. You know, I love charts, right? It has a chart that shows you every time he's a point man, he fails in his mission for the United States dramatically, and his family makes millions. That would include Iraq, Ukraine, China would be the biggest money ones. There are small ones. In each case, family made millions. In the case of China, multiple millions. And he failed in his mission as point man. Again, that information was available. And the establishment, the elite, the whatever this club is, decided they do the best they can to hide it from you. I mean, it was available. It was there. They just did everything they could to hide it from you. I mean, you'll never see any of this on NBC, ABC, CBS. You won't see any of it in the New York Times or Washington Post, and you'll see the most scurrilous lies about Donald Trump or me or Republicans. So I really can't say thank you for the authentication. I really can't, because the damage has been irreparable that you've done. But my goodness, can this wake up everybody else to what we're living through here? This is outrageous that they just put this out now when it's been available. I mean, some of this has been available for 2.5 years, and to the Justice Department. So I want to congratulate the people who had the courage to publish this back then, like John Solomon and Fox News and Newsmax and One American News and many of the podcasters and what's called conservative commentators. So let's take a short break. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Welcome back. Well, the Times has now authenticated the hard drive, and we've shown you the text involving the distribution of the proceeds as described by Hunter Biden over a 30-year period of paying for the expenses of the family and then also giving 50% of the salary, which was largely the payments he was getting for his father's office. And as you would imagine, 50% went to the boss, the top guy. And obviously it's more than 50% because he had a lot of his expenses paid too. So this is a textbook racketeering case, like the Parking Violations Bureau case I prosecuted. I don't know, could you compare it to the mafia cases where they were in the business? How about the Teamsters case that I did? A bribery scheme over a long period of time, 30 years as defined by Hunter Biden, involving multiple millions of dollars and a number of different countries, some of which are pretty darn antagonistic to the United States, particularly Russia and China. This is a pretty serious matter, right? About as serious as we've ever accounted, right? The covering up of it is even more serious. It indicates that the institutions that we have in place to protect us against this kind of massive corruption at the highest levels of government are failing. They don't exist anymore if you're part of the elite. Well, that's what a communist country is like, right? A communist country is a country largely in which it's a real absolute laughable contradiction. The heads of the party are all millionaires and billionaires, and in some cases, some of the richest people in the world, like Putin or Mr. Xi, or they're all very wealthy people. They're the entitled. Well, we're getting there in the United States, aren't we? The upper echelon, very highest echelon of the Democratic Party is entitled. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton got away with murder. Well, I don't mean murder, but I mean they got away with taking multiple millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. I mean, the Clinton Foundation was the top of the pinnacle, a complete cash cow. But selling the Lincoln bedroom and all the stuff they did in Arkansas, I think that's where it got off the track. I mean, the level of corruption in our government. I think that's where it went from some corruption but safeguards against it to pay-for-play schemes that these people just couldn't avoid because the amounts of money was so high. And I mean, that's what the Biden set up, the pay-for-play scheme, in which the commodity they were selling is Joe Biden's office. And as the office got bigger and the influence got better, the price went up. And when he became point man, Obama invested him with the ability to steal enormous amounts of money. And he used it aggressively. He used it in Iraq. He used it in Ukraine. He used it in China. He used it in Russia. Those are the big dollars. Again, if you go back to my podcasts, and I'm talking about now pre-hard drive, it's all laid out. It's all there. I forced it on them. And they increasingly attack me, put me under investigation, put out terrible things about me that are untrue. You don't need more than this. You don't need it. I mean, it'd be good. I mean, if I did a trial, I'd call the witnesses for it, but just one piece of paper. This is a transaction that I believe goes back to 2015 or so, but it covers periods of time in 2014, 2013, 2012. I mean, but the date of the ending of the period here was 2015. This notice was sent to the Ukrainian government, it looks like on the February 18th, 2016. This is right in the middle of Shokin arresting Burisma and Poroshenko meeting with him to talk to him about how he's going to be fired because Biden is pressuring him to fire him because he won't give him the $1 billion unless he fires Shokin and they get the case dismissed. The case meaning the case on Burisma, not just Hunter Biden. And so this is right in the middle of it. This notice is sent right in the middle of the time that the Democrats have been lying to you, said there was no investigation. Well, we have an arrest during that period of time of major proportions. They closed the business down. And then we have this. Liars, cover-up artists. You should have known about this before the election. Or, I mean, those of you who would listen to my podcast or Sean Hannity or some of the others would have known about it, but those who wouldn't, completely frozen out and discredited at times. And here's what it does. I mean, we'll put it up for you to read as I go through it, but it's a typical sleazy money laundering transaction. You know I love charts, so here's my chart, okay? I'll show it to you right here, okay? So the total amount is $14,665,982. Says it right here. And it begins with AS Privat Bank, which was the principal bank for the laundering of money in Ukraine. It had 2 floors. The main floor for the people upstairs were a series of computers that mimic banks through which you put transactions, and by the time they came out, it would be hard to trace. That's how they took the entire treasury of Ukraine. When Yanukovych left, there was about $100,000 in the bank. That's what Poroshenko began with. That's why Biden's holding back the $1 billion loan guarantee was so extortionate. I mean, the country was gone if they didn't get it. It's really funny. I mean, isn't it? And funny. It's ironic and sad and criminal and horrible. Once again, he's holding back from Ukraine, right? This time he's holding back MiGs. Then he was holding back the $1 billion unless they did. Well, I don't know what he wants now. Who knows? But in any event, here's the transaction. Just very simple with the chart. You can read it if you want. And here are the names of the companies, all of whom were front companies. So it's described as 14 million plus, right? Moving from Privat Bank in Ukraine, and then it goes. The money gets received, they say, from WireLogic Technology, from Belize, as payments for a loan agreement, and then it goes into a bank in Latvia. And then it goes into another Privat bank in Cyprus. Now, remember, this is the official location of the crooked company Burisma. And from there, it goes to Hunter Biden, Alan Apter, Alexander Kwasniewski, and Devon Archer. So the two we're interested in are the Biden company. So it goes as $14,665,982 from Privat Bank in Ukraine, coming in from a company called WireLogic, which was a front, used as a front. And it then moves to Latvia as a loan, goes to Cyprus as a loan. Now, Cyprus, remember, is the home of the Burisma company. That's where Mykola Zlochevsky put it. So while he was a government minister, he could give himself all the best leases and deals on oil and gas, which made his company so wealthy. But it was a Cyprus company. He was getting paid in Cyprus. And that's how he laundered out, at least $5 billion that he's charged with. And he wants to keep, and that's why he hires Biden. And then finally, part of that money, it's about 3.4 million of it, moves from Cyprus to the Biden company, to Devon Archer and Hunter Biden. And then we have a notation that 900,000 was for Joe Biden. Okay. So this is here for two years. This is available as of February 2019. Nobody could say you were interfering with the election back in February of 2019. In fact, you could say by not investigating, you're interfering with the election because it should be investigated before the election to get cleared up. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe this is a phony document. Maybe. On the other hand, it doesn't look like it. It's an official document from the government. It's backed up by, you see the transaction actually coming into the Biden company when Devon Archer goes on trial for fraud. And they had to release their books. You see it. So you got it cross-corroborated. This 900,000, well, maybe Biden will say I never got it, but it says it was going to him. Just like the 50%, just like paying for, you got to investigate these things. If you're not crooked, never investigate it. Why isn't this out there? Why wasn't this out there before the election? It was available a year and a half before the election. Well, maybe this is the start. We have cracked a barrier. The Times has indicated that the hard drive and the computer is authentic. Believe it or not, I don't believe that Hunter Biden should be treated differently than anybody else. But I think he should be treated like everybody hasn't been. The money laundering is a different story. To me, that's a major crime, particularly on this level. But then there's also what they're avoiding, which is the bribery. This is going to be proven at some point. It's about there if you pay attention. I mean, the proof is there. You can find it on my podcast. You can find it on John Solomon's writings. You can find it in Miranda Devine's book. And there'll be other books written, and historians will come to the conclusion that Joe Biden was one of the most crooked presidents in the history of America, and he was elected under false pretenses. You don't have to get much worse than this, depriving the American people of information from which they could conclude that major crimes were going on. At least they were saying they were. So maybe there's another explanation, but you've got to be challenged for that other explanation. What's the press worth? What's truth worth? What's justice worth if that's not the case? Well, this is the beginning of unraveling it. Once again, we've been proven to be absolutely 100% correct in everything that we said about the hard drive, everything we said about Hunter Biden, everything we said about Ukraine. And we are slowly, a little slower because it's dribbling out, but we now have a report from Wisconsin, a major one done by a judge, and a recent one in Atlanta, in which many of the allegations of fraud during the election are now being proven, established. And the realization is that they didn't come from me. They came from 1,000+ American people in different parts of the country who witnessed it. And expert analysis of documents, videotapes. But we'll leave that for another day. Let's be content with the fact that the New York Times now tells us that the hard drive and the computer is authentic. So now let's look at the rest of it. Okay? Well, thank you very much for paying attention to this. It means a lot to me, but it means a lot to the country because I have suffered greatly. And I don't mean what they're doing to me. I mean for my country. I felt a tremendous weight having this information and making sure my people got it, my fellow countrymen got it, and at best half of you got it. My anger at the people who prevented you from getting it knows no bounds, except I have to have it have bounds. And my fear that this will become the norm is there. This is the opportunity to stop that. This has got to not stop now. They opened the dike. Let's break it open. This is 1/10 of what's there. Let's get the rest of it. Also, I want to remind you of my call to action last week. I haven't forgotten. Remember? Email your congressman, your senator, and the White House and tell them, do not do business with homicidal tyrants like Maduro, like the Ayatollah who runs the regime of terror, and Putin. Don't buy oil from them because of the pressures of the green agenda, which, under any circumstances, whether you agree with it or not, and I don't, you can put it off for 5 years. So write to them and then send it to rudyscommonsense.com, where we have a special place for it because we're going to bring them all together and we're going to show that we need to have this done. We should stop subsidizing murder. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day. We say a silent prayer for the people of Ukraine to God to protect them. They're very religious people. They're good people. Don't confuse the people of Ukraine with the few crooks that run that country, like you shouldn't confuse the U.S. with Joe Biden. And thank God that we're in America. God bless America.